All righty. Well, thank you. I appreciate all the accolades there. Very nice. For me, it's been nice the last 5 years. I got out of the craziness that is SoCal. I was there for 35 years and moved to Nashville in 2015. Um, but you know, always have still a lot of friends back there, and I do miss it every now and then. But enjoying my time out here. So let's get started with the essentials of MVC Core. So myself, I'm a business technology consultant in Nashville. Got over 34 years, probably 35 now of IT experience. I've been running my own business for 30 years. I actually owned a consulting company in Orange County for 26 years. I sold that in 2017. Now I'm just a writer, a speaker, a consultant, a mentor. I do a lot of Pluralsight stuff. I got 26 courses up there, so take a look at my courses out there. I'd appreciate it if you take a look at those. I still have a daughter to put through college. My contact information is there. Luckily, I was able to keep my website. The company didn't want it, so I'm still the same website, still the same email address I've had for years and years. All right. So with that, let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and stop my video. You guys don't need to be looking at me the whole time here. Okay. So why ASP.NET Core, right? So, I mean, we've been using the .NET framework for years and years, and now, ASP.NET Core, well, they did make .NET framework open source as well. So this one is also, but this one's more cross-platform now to run on Windows.
Oh, looks like we lost Paul there.
Yeah, hold on. Wow. Okay, I don't know what happened there.
Because I jinxed it earlier by saying that it was much easier to do these over Zoom.
I guess so. That's all right.
On me.
No, it happens. Hey, it's the internet, right? What are you going to do?
Yep.
All right. So anyway, why ASP.NET Core? Well, it's cross-platform, so we can run it on Windows, Mac, Linux, things like that. We get one method for building web UIs and web APIs. We get integration with kind of modern client-side frameworks such as Angular, React, and Bootstrap. We have built-in dependency injection. We have it's really a lightweight. It's a lot more high performance than ASP.NET. So, just something to keep in mind that you don't have to use this. It is kind of the new way to do it, but it's not the only way. You can still use the .NET framework. It will continue to be around for many years, I'm sure. But it's something that's new. You might want to take a look at it. I like it. I think it's kind of neat. They've added some really cool stuff, I think. So what can we build? Well, as I mentioned, for ASP.NET, which is what we're focusing on tonight, we can do MVC, which is the very popular MVC design pattern that we've been using for many years now. Remember old web forms? Well, if you want to kind of do something that's similar to that, they brought in this thing called Razor pages in the last couple of years. More of a page-focused approach to web development. And if you're familiar with web forms and never really moved to MVC, this might be a good path for you. I'm more familiar with MVC. I haven't touched web forms in years and years, so I kind of personally like MVC. We also have the new Blazor, which is a framework for building interactive web UI with C#. It renders the UI as HTML and CSS, or there's the ability to run this thing in a web assembly file as well down on the browsers. That's still coming. It's probably not 100% there yet, but it will keep getting traction, I think, and hopefully it's not the next Silverlight. Those of you that remember that. And also for the web piece of it, ASP.NET Core, we can also do web APIs. So. And that's, I think, where a lot of people have started with this. They've actually kind of started out doing the web APIs and maybe still did a lot of stuff for their kind of front-end stuff in MVC in .NET Framework. Now, as I mentioned, they also came out now. You can do WPF and you can do Windows Forms now as well. So you can still do the desktop development in ASP.NET Core as well. Now, it's not a simple port. You're not going to be able to take your .NET Framework apps and just move them over onto Core. There will be some rewrite involved, so just be aware of that. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on MVC tonight, so the model view controller. So the model refers to like your data access. The view is your UI, and that's using basically the Razor syntax within your MVC pages. And the controller is a way to get data from the model and provide it to the view. It's kind of like the middleman there who's in charge of coordinating everything back from the view to the model and from the model to the view. Okay, now what are you going to need to do this? You can use Visual Studio, okay, or you can use VS Code. I'm going to use VS Code tonight because I'm kind of assuming that some of you may not have started using VS Code. When you use VS Code, it is very different from Visual Studio, but at the same time, it has a lot of similarities. When you use VS Code, you will have to install C#. It's under the extensions, so that's something. And then you will need .NET Core 3. Whatever the latest version is, and you can get that at .net.microsoft.com. So those are the things that you need to bring down and install to be able to do it. But again, there's nothing wrong with using Visual Studio. Visual Studio will still work kind of the way you're used to. It might make using ASP.NET Core a little bit easier, so it might lessen your learning curve a little bit. All right, so those of you that know me know I'm not huge on a lot of PowerPoints, so I've got very few, but we are going to have some. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up a PowerShell window here, and I'm going to go into, I create everything under D drive on my samples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a command here, .NET new MVC-N, and I'm going to give it a name, a project name, MVC Basics. Okay, so .NET, this is when you install, .NET Core on your machine, they come with this command. That's part of, a command line utility here. So we do .NET new, and then you tell it what kind of application you're going to build. So MVC, you could do, the Razor pages, you can do WPF, you can do WinForms. There's all sorts of stuff. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here. And as you can see, it kind of just takes a little bit, and then it's built. I'm going to then go down into this folder, and I'm going to bring up VS Code. Bring it over here to the other screen. Whoops, sorry. There. Hate this thing sometimes. All right. Move it over here. I don't have to look at it. There we go. All right. So it comes up, and one of the things it's going to ask you is says required assets to build and debug are missing from this project. Do you want to add them? And you'll always say yes. So what that does is simply goes out, downloads a few more things. And as you can see here in the output window, right, you can see it downloads a bunch of stuff. It downloads some packages, and then basically it installs it for use within this project. All right, there we go. And at this point, you can just say run, start debugging. And it's going to do a build process just like we're used to. If there were any errors, those would show up. Okay. And now, as you can see, there's our home page. So it builds a little home page for you, so you're not just, left hanging. You got something that you can work with here. Okay, so just kind of keep this like that. There we go. All right. So now that we have that, let's take a look at kind of the way this is organized. If you're familiar with MVC, this shouldn't be too radically different, but let's kind of just go through a couple of things here. So there is a different program flow than you might be used to. There's a program.cs file, and in there's a main method where it creates what's called a host builder. And from this, it uses this startup class, and the startup class is in startup.cs. And it has a constructor, which, initializes some things. It then has two methods that we use: configure services and configure. Configure is where we can set up some endpoints, and that's where the first route is hard-coded basically to home/index. Now, basically, it launches what's called Kestrel, right, which is the default web server for core projects. It launches on HTTPS localhost 5001 when you have a development circle certificate available. The first time you run this, it could prompt you. I'm trying to remember how it does it, but it should actually prompt you and tell you that there is no development certificate. And all you'll have to do is just install a local certificate. It should have directions for you, okay? Or it can just launch on HTTP if you want. Highly recommended you run everything under HTTPS these days. As you know, pretty much everything should be run under HTTPS. All web projects, all web applications, websites, everything should now be on the secure server. All right. Now, MVC, what it does then the first time in, right, when it says, oh, we're going to this home index page, it's going to create an instance of the home controller class. So this is a kind of a standard. It's a way that they have come up with using MVC that says whatever the name of the file is, so home.cshtml, you're going to have a home controller. And what it does then, it calls the index method located within that home controller. All right, so the view then is combined with a layout.cshtml, and I'll talk about that in a minute. In fact, let's go ahead and just show it right now. All right, so under views, here under home, you can see this index, okay? And under index here that will relate to the method name that we find in the home controller, right? So the home folder here under views and home controller right here. And then down here a ways, you're going to find a method called index. Okay. And index simply returns view, which says go and find index.cshtml. And if we look at this, you'll see that it's not very big. Okay, so you're thinking, well, where is all the rest of it? Well, that's where this layout that I was just talking about in the PowerPoint comes in. Okay, so this underscore layout, this is the Chrome. This is kind of where everything is located. The HTML, the head tag, we have the body, and then under here we have the header, which is where all of our navigation is. Okay, so our nav class, our div with our class container, they use Bootstrap still. Okay. And then down here, this is the main part right here. It says render body. When it shows this, it says, okay, what was the thing you were trying to load? Well, we are in home controller index, and it said to return a view. So it says go find index, take all of this, and put it in right here where this render body is. So it goes through, it runs any code that happens to be in that CSHTML file, and then it combines it and puts it all right within this main and close main tags. And then down here it has a footer, and it has a body, closing body, and a closing HTML tag. And that's then what runs. So if you go in here and you change something in here, okay, so if I change this, H1 here, to say, okay, welcome to the LA.NET user group, and let's take out the P tag here. Let's save all of this, and then we run this. We should see our changes. Now, out of the box, by the way, every time you run this, okay, and you want to change something, you're going to have to close this, you're going to have to stop it from running, and you'll have to make the change and then rerun it. But there is a way, just look up how to do it, but there is a package that you download through NuGet, and you can install that package, and then it will keep track of any changes you make, and you won't have to stop and start. Okay, but that's through VS Code, all right, that you'll have to do that. All right, so there we go, kind of the basics of getting going here. Now the routing, as I mentioned, right, so it's, in this case, we're local host, but then you do the, kind of the convention is the controller name / and then the action method, right? So the method name within that particular controller. So here you can see one called blog controller and the get method. So when you see blog/get, you know the controller name to go to and you know the index name to go to. Okay. And then, let's see, where was it? Oh, I thought I had it there, but I guess not. Let me go ahead and show you that. So down here under the startup, okay, this is one of those kind of program and startup. These are kind of your bootstrapping of all of your website here. Okay, oops. All right, so under startup at the very bottom here, we have where the endpoint is that we want to start with. And as I can see here, the pattern is controller and action. So that matches what I was just showing you there, right? The controller name / the action, and then optionally, you can also have an ID. All right, so it'd be / and then a 1. And if you had some code in there, and I'll show you that later, that you were to pass on to there, like a /1, it could actually go out, grab the primary key with a value of 1 in your database table that you're using on this page and display it. All right, so I'm trying to go through this part a little fast. I'm kind of assuming everybody knows a little bit about MVC at this point. I mean, it's been out for many, many years. What I'm trying to do is just point out some of the differences that you'll find in the MVC Core. So as you can see, everything we do here in MVC Core, a lot of it is very explicit. It's code you write to do configuration. Whereas in MVC before, a lot of it was kind of underneath the hood, and you would change things in maybe the web config, or if you had a JSON file, you could change things through that sometimes. So we used to have to configure things through config files. Normally these days now, we actually just write code. Actually say I want to use HTTPS redirection. I want to be able to use static files, so a .html file. Okay, we're using routing, so then here's our routing map here, our kind of our default pattern. Okay, whether we're going to use authorization or authentication, all of that can be in here as well. All right, so that's kind of the basics of how we get started. All right, so this is the folder structure here. This is very standard. It's very similar to what we had inside of MVC in the .NET framework as well. We have a controllers folder where we put our, all of our controllers. Under views, we can add additional folders. So I could say, let's create a new folder called Paul. When I do that, then I need a Paul controller. So I could copy and paste here. And I could do a Paul controller.cs. Okay, and then I could change this to be Paul controller. Okay. And then I could have whatever I want in here, right? So I could say, you know what, I'm just going to have a Madison method. So that means that in the Paul folder, okay, I could have a Madison.cshtml and then Madison Sheriff. There we go. Okay. So then how would we get to that, right? So let's see, did I do everything correctly? I'm kind of just doing this on the fly here. But let's see what I did here. Let's go ahead and start the debugging. So it should still come up with the home and index, right? Okay. But now I should be able to do Paul/Madison. So controller / the method name. And if I've done everything correctly, whatever we put there inside of our CSHTML file should now show up. All right, pretty simple. So just kind of the basics of getting started with MVC here. All right, now there's a lot of folders. I've kind of shown you most of those. The views, the properties is where we can put JSON files used to configure our development environments. Okay, this one's a little bit different. So where you'll find any CSS or JS or any libraries like Bootstrap and jQuery or anything else that you might download is now going to go under the www root and then under the appropriate folder here. So if you were to install something through a NuGet package, okay, it's going to bring it down and you would put it into the lib file here, okay, the lib folder under www root. So that's a little different. So your site.css goes here. Okay, so that's, kind of your global style sheet, other than, of course, Bootstrap, which is already in there. And then if you had any JS JavaScript that you wanted across the site, okay, you want to always keep those things small and kind of do them page by page. But if you had something that you're going to use all over the place, you could put it in the site.js. Okay. All right, so Rajiv just had a question about where is the route defined for the action method. Well, remember, this is a template down here under the start. Okay, this is the endpoints. This is the pattern, right? This just happens to be the starting point, the home and the index. Otherwise, it's going to go ahead and use this, okay? It's going to use this as the pattern, which is controller/action. All right, hopefully that makes sense for you there. All right, I think I covered the majority of some of this other stuff. Again, a lot of this stuff is kind of more just very typical of what we had before, but if you had some global imports you wanted to bring in, there's a view imports, and you can add some using statements here. We can do an add tag helper if we're going to use tag helpers, which I am going to show you tonight, so hold on to that. Okay. The view start tells us which is the, the master page to use, the QA, right? Okay, the Chrome, right? So that's that layout page that says which one we're using. Validation scripts, so jQuery uses the unobtrusive, jQuery validation, so those things are already there as well. We have an error page already here. All right, so kind of everything is kind of here, just ready for you. It's up to you to just start building your application and then adding things in as you need them. All right, let's keep going. I want to keep moving forward here. All right, so I'm sure a lot of you are still familiar with the HTML helper class. Okay, this was brought out when MVC came out many, many years ago. You would do add html.action link, and that would create an anchor tag. You would do add html.textbox, and that would create an input type equals text. If you wanted to bind to a model property, you would do textbox4. So you had all these methods which would help us generate the HTML. Okay, we have an at url.action for building an anchor tag, as you can see here, to provide us with a controller/action method name. So these all still work. However, there's a new way to do it now. Okay, so come on, Microsoft always has to do something to screw us up. So their latest thing now, which actually I love, I think it's so much easier. But now, instead of using that add HTML class, you'll still use it every now and then. There's some things you can't do through tag helpers, but now you're going to do tag helpers. And this is really neat because we do an ASP dash and then some name. So for an anchor tag, I can now do ASP dash action is index. So action being the method. ASP dash controller is home. Well, that would be home controller then. But everything else looks just like, HTML. If you ever use the add HTML stuff, you remember how a pain it was to add on additional things like class. You had to do at class equals and then BTN and BTN primary. And you didn't get IntelliSense when you were in that HTML tag helper. Since we're working with things right in here in the editor, we actually get IntelliSense. So let me come over here. I'm going to go ahead and open up the index here. And what I'll do is I'm going to put a div here, and I'm just going to do an anchor tag. And I can do an ASP dash action equals. And if you remember, I created one called Madison in an ASP controller. And look at that, we get IntelliSense for the controller or for the ASP dash tags. Okay. So if you remember, that one I put into the Paul controller. Okay. Click here for Madison. Okay, so what's neat about this is, I can add then class equals. I don't know why my IntelliSense is not working, but Usually it would come up there with your, your bootstrap stuff. So that's really neat. And now what can I do? I can run this. And again, as long as I typed in everything correctly, click here for Madison, and it goes to Madison. So it builds the URL. Okay. All right, so somebody asked, can I still use the data dash attributes? You can still use any data dash. These do not interfere. They are completely separated, right? Okay, so if you're still using some sort of knockout library or something like that, or maybe you're using Angular and you want to use the Angular tags, that's all still available to you, not a problem. All we're doing here is for the anchor tag is we're telling it to build. Well, in fact, let's go ahead and do this. Because remember, guys, all we're doing here, we're building this server side, but what does it do? It generates client-side code, right? So anything else you add, it's still going to be there. Okay, so let's see, where are we down here? There we go. So you can see the anchor tag here with the href, and the href says to go to /Paul/Madison. There we go. Okay, so yeah, if you add anything else, it's still going to be there. Any data dash you add or anything else from any other library, yeah, no problem at all. Data dash my tag equals something. That will get generated along with everything else, not a problem. Okay, good. All right, so anchor tags, very powerful. You'll use these. I'm going to show you a few more of these as we go along, but you will find anchor tags for just, they work with most of the things that you would do. So the select, for instance, I'll show you that a little bit later. So instead of you having to, build lists and do all of this, write kind of C# code within here, we can actually do it within HTML. But remember, this is just getting interpreted, okay, by the ASP.NET Core engine, right? So it's going to figure out that it's got these ASP dash things. It takes these, eliminates them, and generates the appropriate client-side code. All right, cool. Partial pages. So I'm sure you guys are, familiar with, like, in the old days we had user controls, okay, and then in MVC we also had, includes that we did, okay. Suzette asked, you mentioned there are certain situations where you should use @HTML helpers. Where would that be? Well, there's a few of them. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but suffice it to say this. If there's something that you're not finding for a tag helper, okay, something, that I just showed you, like the A with the ASP dash, if you find a tag, an HTML tag that you want to build server side, and you don't see an ASP dash whatever with it, you're going to have to turn to the HTML helper. Okay, so like in some cases, you might still want to use the drop-down list. They're all still available there. Okay, you can still do everything through the @HTML class. All right, but it's just that some of the, table, okay, for instance, the table doesn't have any helper, so you're still going to have to use an @ and a for each, okay? Or wasn't there an @HTML helper to build a kind of a table? I think there was at one point. I don't know if it's still available, but that would be a case where you might have to use that. So good question. All right, so if you have a piece of reusable UI, right, that you want to reuse on multiple pages, we can still use the @HTML.partial helper, but we can also use this new partial tag helper. So it looks like this: partial name equals, and then some name of a CSHTML file. Okay, so for instance, let's say I wanted to include this div tag on a few different pages. I could create a new file, call it _Madison links.cshtml. And by the way, the underscore is simply a convention. You don't have to use that for partial pages, but if you do, then anyone else coming in will look at this and know that that is a partial page. Okay, so then I can come here and I can do the partial name equals _Madison links. And the case should not matter here. Okay, and if I've done everything correctly by doing that, it should now just simply bring in There we go. And it still works just like it did before. Okay, but now I could use this on other pages, right? So I could actually take this partial and put it on 10 other pages. And then if I want to make a change, I only have to make the change here in one place. Excellent. All right. Now, let's go. I thought I had that. I guess I did not. All right, let's go down here and take a look at the layout. So one of the things you see down here is this render section script. So what if you wanted to add some JavaScript to your page? Okay, so you'd have to come down here and actually do a section scripts. Okay, so it looks like C# code here, right? Actually, I think it's section if I remember right. I always have to look these things up too, folks, so it might be sections. Okay, and then what happens here is I could now write an alert testing or something. Okay, but what happens is when I said render section scripts, okay, it says that this, just like the render body up here said to render anything here, it says if you find a scripts section, make sure it goes here, which is at the very end, right before the body. Okay, so if I do this correctly, maybe it's that one has to be uppercase here. Let's run this. And there we go. Okay, so that came up, but take a look at the page source here, and you'll find out that that script went here at the bottom. And the reason why is because I said that I want this section scripts to include this here. What if I were to take this script, not use this, and put it up here, okay, save this, and then rerun this? What's going to happen now? Okay, well, first off, it comes up first before it even draws the page, right? That's because if you view the page source now, we come down here, you'll see the script tag is now up here above that. That's not where we put script tags, is it? Script tags belong at the bottom. So thus we create this section scripts and we include our script down there. Now, what about styles, right? I mean, do you want to be able to do style here and say, hey, I'd like to add some custom styles for this page. So for the H1, I want to, maybe do a color of white or something. That's show up, okay? Something like that, right? So again, where is that style going to appear, right? Well, that's kind of the issue that we have. So what I want to do is I want to include a new section. So what I'll do is I'll come over here to the layout and up here in the head, right? Because, styles belong in the head. What I would do is I would do an @render section and I do head styles like so, and then required is false. So we don't need it, but you're allowed to then put it in. Okay, so now what I can do is in here, I can actually do the same thing. @section, head styles, and wrap it into the curly braces, because this tells, ASP.NET, this is code you need to figure out something to do with. All right, and now again, if we run it, it's going to take these and put them wherever that render section is located. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our page source again, and there we go, it's within our head. Because otherwise, if you think about it, how else would I include a style here on this partial page, right? Because everything's really a partial page if you think about it. Okay, we don't really have a way to say, hey, I got one style here that's just for this page. I can't just go over here to the layout and include it here, because then it would get on every single page. So we do it like this, where we create our own section, put a style in, and then we are styling. All right, bad joke. Cool. All right, so our head styles. I just showed you the JavaScript, so sorry, I'm kind of just doing stuff on the fly here just because why not? It's kind of fun. All right, now, some of you may be used to using the web.config file, right? Okay, and you're used to putting your own session or section in there under app settings, and you're adding your own keys and values. Well, in the .NET Core world, we do everything with JSON files. Okay, so I've got app settings.json. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an MVC basics. Okay, I'll go ahead and move it down here. So I'm creating another property here called MVC basics, and then I'm creating a literal object here with two additional properties, company name and contact name. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to be able to use this data, right? Okay, so how do we do that? Well, in the index page, or excuse me, the home controller, we go into the home controller. Okay. One of the things we're going to do is use what's called dependency injection. Now, do you see the home controller is the name? This is the constructor right here on lines 14 through 16. So you're asking yourself, well, where does this iLogger home controller come from? Okay, so you've created an instance of this, but how does it get passed in? I mean, you're not doing anything with home controller. ASP.NET is doing that. Well, it's because this logger, the iLogger interface, has been registered with ASP.NET to say, hey, guess what? If you specify this iLogger in your constructor, I will insert it for you. I will inject it for you automatically. And there's a couple of them that we can do that with. Okay, and one is called configuration. Okay, now in order to use that, okay, you're going to have to do a using on Microsoft Extensions configuration. So it adds it up here. And then we have configuration, and we'll call this underscore config, for instance. Okay. Now that we have that, we can say, let's tell ASP.NET to bring in config, and then we'll assign that to this guy that we created, right? So our little private field here called underscore config, we're going to say, hey, ASP.NET, I want you to insert this iConfiguration instance, and it will go ahead and insert it for me, and it will inject it. And by the way, you're allowed to build in your own as well. I think I have a sample of that coming up a little bit later too. So now what do we do? Okay, well now if I were to, in the index here, if I wanted to actually, do something with this, what I could do is I could add a couple of properties here. Okay, let me come up here. I'm going to add a couple of just regular properties, company name and contact name. If you remember, that's what I created here. Okay, so I'm going to create a couple of property names here. And then I want to read these values from the config file. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little bit of code that looks like this. Okay, I'm saying company name, go to that config and get the value. It's a string, so go get it. And it's from MVC basics : company name. MVC basics : company name. Okay, or MVC basics : contact name, right? Okay, so this config is already built into ASP.NET, allows you to read configuration files, which in this case is your app settings.json. All right, so now what can I do with this? Well, if I were to go here to the index page, okay, one of the things that I can do is I can specify the model for this page. And the model is going to be the home controller, right? Because that's the one that actually has these properties, right? A model means, right, a class that has properties that we want to use. And those properties could be set by coming from a database, or it could be, in this case, coming from whatever data we give to it. All right, so now I say I want to use that. So now all I have to do is access these guys. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and put another H1 here, and I'm going to say @model.company_name, @model.contact_name. So when you see @model, that means look up here, find out the model name, which in this case is home controller. Okay. If you click F12, it will take you there, right? So just like we're used to, or right mouse click and say go to definition. So real easy. All the IntelliSense stuff is built in. And at this point, we should be able to run this. And if I've typed in everything correctly, we should see the values. Oops, what did I do? Okay, I goofed something up. Object references. Oh, sorry. That was my fault. So I did that on purpose. Okay. So one last thing we have to do here when you're passing in a model, okay, and what I'm doing is passing in this instance of home controller. You have to tell the view that you're passing it. Well, in this case, I'm passing this because it's this particular class. But if I had a product class, for instance, I would create an instance of the product class, and then I would return view, and I'd pass in the variable name that references that product. Okay, and I will show you examples of that coming up too, by the way. But here we go. And there you go. Okay, so those values are now coming out of the app settings.json. Very cool. All right, so lots of stuff here, guys, okay? If you want to change things about your Chrome, you come into the layout, you can, modify things in here. You could add additional, items here. So like we have home and privacy, okay? We can add a lot more stuff, okay? So Jeff just asked, wouldn't you create a view model to pass to the view rather than using a controller class? Yes, it is. I was just doing a sample. Okay, and coming up in the next section, I'm going to show you how to do a view model. So yes, my straight man for the night, okay, he was way ahead of me. So hang on to that thought. Yes, we generally do not use the controller in this method, okay, in this manner, but that is a way to show you without having to create a whole nother class. All right, good. So now let's move on to our next demo here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to my next demo, guys. Hang on just a second. Okay, there we go. All right, before I do this, I've got a little thing I'm going to do. Okay, so as Jeff just pointed out, right, we generally don't use the controller as our model. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are using the entity framework or Dapper or some other sort of, mechanism, mapper maybe to do your entity stuff, right? Your data classes, all right? So I'm assuming you have like some entity classes like a product, a customer, an employee, or something that models something in your database. So we generally have, our entity classes. We might have our data access classes. We have view models. If you're like me, I love view models. I use the MVVM approach. I've been doing that, gosh, for years and years. So I like that approach. So same type of thing like we'd always do. To really do things right, you should be building class libraries. Okay, so the class libraries I'm going to build, I'm going to have like a common library. I might have a data layer. I might have an entity layer. I might have a view model layer. If you're doing a repository pattern, you might have an interface layer and a repository layer. Lots of different, ways you can, skin this. So to create a class library, all right, all you have to do is you can do it right from within Visual Studio Code here. Okay, so I can go down into a terminal here. I can create a new terminal window. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory called MVC entity layer, for instance, and then I will change directory into that, .NET new, class lib, okay? And what this is going to do then is it's going to build a class library for me when I hit enter here. Okay, just like that, pretty simple. And then if I want, I can add a reference to that. Okay, so I would go back up to the MVC basics and I can add a reference to it by doing a .NET add dot reference. So I'm adding it to the current, the dot means the current folder. Okay, and I'm referencing this entity layer that I just built down there. Okay, oops, did not find the project. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. And then if we come up here and we were to take a look at the MVC basics.cs proj, you'll find that it now has a project reference included. Okay. Then what we can do is we can add a folder to the workspace. Okay. So we would come down here to the MVC entity layer and we would add this folder. And there we go. We now have our class 1 in here, right? All right, so you would do this over and over again until you build up a series of them. Now, I'm not going to do this in front of you because that would be silly. All right, instead, I'm going to now bring up a project that already has that stuff for us. All right, so let's go ahead and collapse this all down. So what I've done is I have my MVC basics. That's the one that we were just looking at. Okay, but now I have my entity layer here. So I have some entity classes. I have a product class. So I'm using the AdventureWorks Lite database, and it has a product ID, a name, a product number, a color, a standard cost, a list price, a size, a weight, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Bring up SQL Server here. Okay, so then if we were to go look down here under AdventureWorks Lite, okay, we would see our product table. And there, as you can see, a product ID, a name, a product number, a color, a standard cost, a list price, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what I've done is I've simply built a product class, right, that models that. I have a data layer, and I am using a repository pattern here, so I actually created an interface that says I'm going to have a list of products called get. So then I have my implementation. Now my implementation for this one simply returns a hard-coded list of products. Okay, but eventually I'm going to, coming up here in the next couple of samples, I will show you how to use the entity framework here. Okay, and then I have a view model layer. So I have a product view model. And in this view model, I've got a method called load products, which will go ahead and get that data and fill in my list of products. So then how do I use this thing, right? Okay. Well, obviously I had to set references to all those other projects. So in my main project here, you can see I've got included the entity layer, the view model, and the data layer. Okay, there we go, easy. So then I've got a new controller here called lists controller. And I've got a sample 1 and a sample 2. And both of them are just going to simply load some products. So I create an instance of my product view model, and I pass in a product repository. Now, I want you to look at this. List controller is my class name. This is my constructor. I'm now having ASP.NET inject my own class, right? Or in this case, the interface. So before I told you that they have their own ones built in, right? That iLogger and that iConfiguration. So how do I get my own product repository injected? Well, down in the startup, I can use this on line 24 in the configure services. I can use this services class, and I can add what's called a scoped version of this product repository. So I'm telling it that the interface name is product repository. The concrete implementation of that interface is called product repository. So what happens is ASP.NET will wait until it finds that it's creating a controller that matches, right, iProduct repository to one of the things in its list of services here that have been scoped. And it says, oh, hey, I found one. I'll create an instance of product repository for you. And I will pass it to your controller. So now we actually have a real instance of this product repository. So I'm going to pass that to this product view model. And then the product view model will call load products, which down here I simply say, okay, I got a valid repository. Let's go ahead and do a get. I'm ordering it by the name of the products, and I fill that list of products called products, that property, I fill that with that data. Then inside of my view, here in the view, I can now say I want to use the model from product view model. I want to do a using on the MVC entity layer because I'm going to do a for each here, and I'm going to say, hey, for each product item in model.products, because remember, what is each element in the products property? It's a list of products, so it is a product object. So in order to use this, I need to do a using on the entity layer. Okay? And in order to get at that products property, remember that's a property of the product view model, it's part of the model.products. Now, if you don't want to do the using here, that's perfectly fine. You can use a var here. Okay? And generally, it will be able to figure it out, and it should still give you IntelliSense. Okay, so either way works. So whichever way you prefer, I kind of like having the actual name there. It's a little bit easier for me to remember. Plus, I like it because sometimes I don't remember what they all are, and I kind of like to maybe go right to it. So that's my preference, totally up to you. So what I'm doing is I now have this list of products. I can build an unordered list, or I can build an ordered list. Okay, so I can do a for each, and I have a UL, and I've got an LI. Let's go ahead and run this, and this is how we would build an unordered list and an ordered list. Okay, let's go there. Voila, there's our first one is all of those unordered lists. It's a bullet points. And there we go. I've now got a numbered list as well. So that's the ordered list. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so Herb asked, from my usage, I don't need to check if the repository is injected. It would throw an exception. I know that iService provider is not the same as the get required service. How are you injecting the repository? I'm not sure I understand your question, Herb. Are you asking how it got injected? If so, it's just .NET does that for you, right? Because I added it here. I apologize. I'm not understanding your question. How can an injected repo ever be null? Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're asking, why did I write this code in the load products? Why did I check to see if repository is null, I believe, right? Okay, well, okay, I don't know who is going to be using my view model, do I? I know what I'm doing, okay, but what if somebody were to create an instance? Let me go back here to the controller. What if somebody were to do this? Okay, maybe you brought in a view model, okay, from WPF, and you're not using any injector. Okay, you're using some other environment that doesn't have an injector, and somebody does this. If I now try to do this, I'm going to have a null, aren't I? That's why. Okay, you got to remember, okay, something I do a little bit differently here, okay, is number one, I like to check and make sure things are going to be usable. All right, and then I want to throw my own error message, because I don't know about you, but Microsoft's error messages suck. That's a technical term, suck. Okay, so I want to throw my own. So that's one reason why I do it this pattern. Another reason is because I reuse my view models, not just in ASP.NET Core, but I use them in WPF. I might use them in Windows Forms. I might use them in a web API. And I may or may not have dependency injection in all of those environments. So I hope that makes sense, Herb. I'm just doing a little bit of extra checking, that's all. So call me a little anal, maybe. But I like to be just a little bit more cautious, because again, I don't know who's going to be using my stuff. All right, great. So there was building an UL and an OL just using a for each loop. Okay, there's no tag helper that goes with ULs or OLs. Okay, so, but now let's take a look at building a select list, right? So let's go ahead and run this guy so you can see what it looks like first, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at the code. So a select, as you all know, is just either a drop down like this, or if you set the number of rows, it would look like a list box with like 5 rows open or whatever. But this is a select, right? Okay, so to build this, the code I wrote between these two items is exactly the same. Whether I'm building a UL or an OL or a select, the code here is exactly the same. I'm still getting my list of products. But now what I want to do is I want to build a select. So the class is form control. That's a bootstrap thing. And now look at this. I got ASP-4 selected product.product ID. So in my product view model, okay, what I'm doing is I'm saying when they select something from this, set this property, selected product.product ID. And let's go down here to my view model again. So not only do I have a list of products, but I have a single product that says this is the one that got selected. Okay, because remember, think about it. I'm going to do a drop down. I want to be able to select one. The product ID is going to get filled in now to this. So then what could I do? I could write some code to say, okay, let's go get maybe the rest of the data for that one product ID. So that gives us that. And then to build the select list, I just simply have to do ASP-items equals, and now I'm writing a little bit of code here, right? So the @ sign means run this as code. C# will say, great, let's build a new select list. Let's go to our model.products, and then the data value field lists first, right? And then the data text field lists second. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and run this again, and we'll take a look at what gets generated by this tag helper. So we go in here, let's view the page source, and there is now our select. Okay, it's got some data validation stuff going on here. Okay, we've got then the options, and look at this. There's our product ID that got the value got put into the value portion, and in the textual portion, right, is the name of the product. Pretty easy. All right, so there we go. Some more examples of the the lists, building lists using a view model. So I think I answered the question for the guy who said don't use the controller. Absolutely, we should always use a view model like this. Okay, that holds your data. That also may be used to go get your data out of the database. All sorts of different things. All right, let's go to our next project now. Let's take a look at building forms. Oops, sorry, double clicked one too many times. There we go. All right. Oops, what did I hit? Oh, I think I brought up the wrong one, didn't I? Forms, samples. All right, somebody asked, how is ASP-4 is for selected product ID, but your view model has an instance of product, not ID. Okay, I think you missed it there. Let me go back. Okay, here's my view model, right? It has a property called selected product, right? Okay, remember, product view model is the complete model for this page. So now I can access the products, okay, model.products, or I can go directly after the selected product that is the property of product view model, and then the selected product is a product, so I can go to the product ID. So ASP.NET takes care of wiring that up for me, right? Doing the data binding for me. Okay, so here's your model for the whole page. This is a property of that view model. And then this is a property of what? The product class. Okay, selected product is an instance of the selected product. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Now, the next thing we need to look at, let's go ahead and run this guy here. We'll take a look at this, and then we'll come and look at the code. All right, so the next thing, so we've seen lists, right? We've seen, selects, we've seen, the OL and the UL. I'm going to show you tables here in a minute. But another thing we're going to want is to build forms, aren't we? Okay, input forms for users to enter data or edit data. So here is a sample of a product name, a product number, a color, a cost, a price. How do we build this, right? Okay, so first off, let's take a look at the page source. So what we have is a form tag. Within the form tag, then we're using Bootstrap, so we do div class equals form group. Then within there, we've got a label and an input. and then another form group, and a label, and an input. Okay, and each one of these is bound to a selected product again. Same thing, selected product.name, selected product.number, product number, selected product.color. Okay, so all of these things are just created for us by code here in ASP.NET. So let's go take a look. So again, I've got a forms controller. And in my sample, I'm saying, okay, now I've got my product view model. Again, I'm passing in my product repository. So I'm going to load a product, not load products, load product, passing in a product ID. Okay, so now this load product says, okay, let's go set this selected product by grabbing repository.get. Okay, so all right, it went to the interface. Let's go back here. Sorry. Load product, and let's go to the implementations now instead of the definition. Okay, same thing here. We'll go to the implementations. So this says, go ahead and grab all the products and then do a where product ID is equal to the ID passed in. Okay, we get that guy. We set him into our product view model, the selected product. We return the view using our view model. So then inside of our views, in sample 1 here, we do label, ASP-4, selected product.name. ASP4, selected product.name. So input and label. Okay, and this whole ASP-4, right, that's what does the data binding, okay, to the model. Okay, so we're using the selected product.name, selected product.product number. So again, if I were to stop here, right, set a breakpoint. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint there on the load. Okay, so here we are. I'll hit F11. I'll start stepping through this. Okay, so it goes out, it gets the data, and it returns to me a selected product, which now has, as you can see, all these various properties: color, discontinued date, is active, list price, name, product ID, product number. So the selected product property of this product view model, right? Sorry. Get out of there. Thank you. Okay, so this product view model, right? His selected product property has now been filled in. Okay, where is it? There it is, with all that data. So now I pass that. I pass the whole view model here to the view. So in the view, it gets it right here and says, okay, I'm the whole model. And one of my properties is selected product. And then I've got the name, I've got the product number, I've got the color, I've got the standard cost. So all of that other code that we saw when we did a view page source is generated by this ASP-4. It creates the ID, it creates the name. If there were any data annotations here, it would also create jQuery unobtrusive validation there. So that code would also be generated by ASP.NET. All right, pretty cool. So we've got forms, and most of these we can do with the tag helpers. Again, this is a case where you used to have to do the @html.input4, right, or textbox4. There you go. You know, and then you would use an expression here, right? Selected product dot color or whatever. Okay, and that would actually generate that input. But this, I think, is just so much more readable and easier to understand. All right, cool. So, forms. Excellent. All right, next up, let's take a look at building tables. Okay, so we're getting close to actually having a whole CRUD here, because we've seen forms. Now I'm going to show you how to build tables, and then from tables, it's just a simple matter of building the CRUD logic. So, oops, samples here. All right, so now what I did in this one is now I've actually, if we were to look at my data layer and look at my repository, okay, nope, I didn't do it yet. I apologize. I'm going to do that in the next one. I thought I did it in this one. I'm gonna show you the entity framework coming up here too. All right, so I've got another controller now called table samples, same code that we saw before, load products. So we know we've got now a products collection. So how do we build a table? All right, well, it's pretty simple. Table, put in whatever bootstrap classes you want to make it look nice. We have our header here with our TR and our THs for our headers. And then we have our T body, and then within the T body, we write our for each. And inside of our for each, we're going to grab each product, and we're going to do a TR and a TD for each column that we want to display. So we're going to do the name, the product number, the standard cost, and the list price. Let's go ahead and run this. First, I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll come back and take a look at what happens. All right, so we've got product space name, product space number, cost price. But look at the cost and the price. They have currency in there, don't they? Okay. All right, so how did all of this happen? How did we get product space name and product space number, and how did we get currencies and everything? Okay, so well, in the THs, we got the product name and product number. Okay, that's easy. And then down here, we use add HTML, so we use the helper class, display for. When you use display for, it looks at standard cost and list price. If we go to those, right? So if we go to our, sorry, we go down here to our entity layer and we take a look at the product page, or excuse me, the product class, what you'll find is I've added now some data annotations. Okay. And so you can see I've added display here. So one of the things I thought I had that, I apologize, but one of the things I could have done is add HTML, and I think it's label for up here, and then it would have given me product name because it looks at the display. Okay, it would have looked at this. But if we look down here at the cost, what I did is I set the data type, and I set the data type to currency. I also set the column type name, so it's a decimal, even though I did it, the model here is decimal. This gives me just, you know, for entity framework, this is going to be a lot more correct, right? But the data type currency, so ASP.NET reads this, and it then says, well, oh, well, then you must want that in a currency format. So it automatically does it when we use this display for. Isn't that nice? So pretty cool. So now I still had to take care of making sure the text went to the right. Okay, it's not going to do that. That's CSS. But as you can see here, it did figure out that standard cost and list price were marked as currency, so it gives us the dollar signs. All right, pretty cool. So we've got tables, all right? So let's get to our last sample of the evening here. And that's CRUD logic now, all right? So now this is a very simple, you know, again, this isn't production code, people. Don't, you know, think this is production code, but this is, you know, what you're going to do to get, you know, at least the basics of CRUD working. So first thing we have to do is if you're going to use, you know, a database, if you're going to use the entity framework, you do need to open up a terminal window and do a .NET add package on Microsoft.entityframework.core.SQL Server. So this is what you do to add the entity framework to core. Remember that core is different than the .NET framework, right? Or even the .NET framework standard. So there are different packages that you must bring in. Now, once we have that, okay, I'm going to create some partial pages, okay, and I'm going to reference those from a product maintenance page. So I'm going to have an edit product, I'm going to have an add product, I'm going to have a save product, I'm going to have a delete product. So I need to be able to do add, edit, and delete here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like, and then we'll kind of walk through the code a little bit. All right. So we come into the product maintenance, it goes out, reads the data from the database there, the database table products in the AdventureWorks Lite database. Okay. And then we've got, as you can see, I got an add new product button, I've got an edit button, and I have a delete button. So if I click on add new product, it comes in and gives me a form that I can use to fill in product. Okay, maybe it's red. I'll make the price or the cost 3, and I'll make the price 10. Size I can make large. The weight, I don't know, 10 or 20, whatever. Then when we start selling, okay, and then I can save this, and there you go. Look at that. It shows right up in the table now. I can go in and edit this, add some data at the end of this, and it does show up. Okay, if I were to look into the table here, there we go. You can see it's actually in the SQL Server now. Okay. I could also then, besides add, edit, and delete, and I'm going to actually use a little JavaScript here to say delete this product, and I'll click OK, and it goes away. If I re-execute this, it indeed has gone away. All right. So there's a very simple CRUD type of, feature. Let's go ahead and hit save here. And it even has validation on it. Okay, so you can see the product name field is required. The field weight must be between 0.5 and 2000. So it's showing me some nice validation here. Now let's talk about validation first, because that's pretty simple. And it should be what you're all familiar with if you're familiar with the entity framework. Okay, it simply uses data annotations. Okay, so name is required. For the weight, where was weight? It should be down here. There it is. So we've got a range on this, right? So the weight had to be filled in. So pretty simple to get validation. Just simply add your data annotations and ASP.NET will take care of the rest. So let's take a look at that. So the detail, _detail.cshtml, you can see my div form group. Okay, I've got the label and the input, and then I added one additional span here, ASP-validation-4 name. Okay, now remember before, look at what my model is this time. It's not the product view model, it's simply product. I'll show you how I did that in just a second. Okay, but you remember that the validation showed up above the form and it showed up after each individual element that was in error. That's because I also added this ASP validation-summary equals all up here at the top. And then I added the span after each one of these. So if there's any sort of data annotations on it, they will show up after each field. So that's how you get your inputs going, your validation, your validation summary. All of this is really simple. I mean, look at that. That is, I think that's so simple. I want to show you one additional thing here on line 7. Input ASP4 product ID. Okay, now let's run this again. I want you to look at something. When I come in here and I go into either edit or add, it doesn't matter, you don't see product ID. Why? Because in the entity, I mark that as a hidden input. So it makes it a hidden input, right? I want to keep the product ID around if there is one for doing an edit because I want it to be posted back with all of the other stuff so I know which one I was editing. So I need this to be around, but instead of me writing the code here to do like, type equals hidden or whatever, I don't have to do that. I could if I want, but I can let ASP.NET do it simply by adding the data annotation. All right, so let's start looking here. Here is product maintenance. This is the main page that I call. The model is my product view model, just like I had before. Okay. Now, go down here. I've got a form method equals post. Okay. And then look what I've got down here. Partial name equals _detail. That's the one we just looked at, right? But look at this, I'm using a 4. I don't need the ASP-4 here. The reason why is because partial is a new element created by ASP. So we don't need the ASP-, we just need the 4. So by saying for selected product, it says take this and use this as the model for this partial class. So that's why the model here is simply of the type product. That avoids me having to do selected product dot name all over, right? So that, otherwise I'd have to do that over and over and over again. It was simply easier to pass down the selected product. Then I can just use this here, right? Each of the product number, color, the properties that are just for product. You could do it either way. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. All right. Now you'll notice I've got a couple other things here. I've got some C# code mixed in here. So I'm saying if the model.isDetail visible, then display that detail partial thing. Otherwise, display the list. Okay, so you can see the other one is underscore list. On this one, I'm passing in. If you don't pass anything, the same view model that comes from the parent page gets passed down. So it's the product view model, right? I didn't do a 4 on this. So it says I will use the same view model. And now I can just check to see if the products are null or if the count is 0, then I can display no records in the product table. Otherwise, I can build my table here and I can loop through and it's just like what we saw before, right? Okay, I've got a for each here, looping through the products. Each time through, I'm creating my edit button, okay? And the edit button, it's anchor tag here. And I'll show you what this data dash is just a second. But here are the other ones, name, product number, standard cost, list price. And then I've got another anchor tag here for deleting. All right. And then up here, let's see, sorry, up here on the list, I also had my button, okay, add new button, okay, add new product, sorry. All right, so we can see how the list works. I just showed you that in the previous example. You can understand how the form works because I just showed you that, so that hasn't changed. So then the question is, how do I navigate around? How do I display the detail visible or the list, right? How does all of this work? Okay, well, some of it works by a combination of some JavaScript, okay, that I got here, a little bit of JavaScript, and my view model. All right, so first off, let's take a look here. Okay, good question. Somebody had a question. As a rule, should you always use server-side validation or a combination of both? You should always use both, because what would happen if somebody turned off JavaScript? Then the jQuery validation would not work, and you could possibly get bad data. So yes, you must always use both. So server-side should always be used, always, 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 and then use the client side if you can, because it's quicker, right? Cool. Okay, good. Dwayne had a question. Is hidden secure? If somebody hacked the form, you could be updating the wrong product. Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so instead of using a hidden, I kind of did that. I mean, great question, Dwayne. I kind of did this on purpose just because I wanted to show you the hidden input data annotation and how that worked. Okay. Generally what I do is I would actually create it, I would keep it in session or something on the back end because I know that I'm in the mode of, edit, right? So then when I come back, I would take the value from session and I would give it back to the view model, okay? So yes, if you're concerned about security and having somebody update a wrong product or something, keep it in session. Otherwise, obviously you could do hidden if you're not worried about it, or maybe you're on an intranet, okay, where it's your own people inside. So lots of different ways you can do it, but you are correct, not the most secure, okay? Another way, obviously, you could also encrypt it if you wanted to, okay? So is there an easy, secure way to have bidirectional information? Well, you could start getting into, encryption and decryption each way back and forth, okay? That's not that hard to do. That would be, certainly a good way to do that. There's some other libraries out there I've seen that will help you do it as well. They all rely on some sort of, encryption though. So, I would definitely look into encryption for that. All right, so let's take a look at this JavaScript. I'm kind of running out of time, guys. I need to get through this here. So, all right. So the first thing I do is in the script here, I'm saying when the document's done loading, look for anything that has a data-custom-command and hook up a click event so that it runs this code. All right, so I want you to look at the list here and notice this anchor tag. I did a data-custom-command equals edit. Okay. Also, look up here. I've got data-custom-command equals add. All right. So what that means is that these two buttons, this button and this anchor tag, is now going to be hooked up. So what it'll do is it will grab that command and fill it into this event command property that I have here. And this happens to be in a standard view model hidden. So this is another partial thing I created that says event command. Okay. So what does this do? Well, this maps up to my view model. In my view model here, okay, actually in the view model base, let's go to the view model base. Okay, oops, it's not going for some reason. I hate it when it does that. Where's my common library? Down here. There. Okay, what I've got here is an event command property. So all I'm doing is I'm basically saying I've got some properties here that are just for me to use. Again, not secure, but again, I'm kind of assuming that I'm doing this in a secure environment like my own or something. But is event command, or the event command, the event argument, and the is detail visible. These are properties that I'm simply keeping around. All right, and again, I could encrypt them if I want, if I'm really worried about security. Well, what happens with these then is those get put in there. So if I have a command like edit, let's actually step through this now so you can see what happens. So I'm going to go into the controller. Okay. So here is when I'm creating the first page, and it's going to display the list. And then this is the postback. So when I click on the add or the edit, this is the code that's going to get called. So now let's run this. And we'll see what happens, because this is where it all comes together. So it's a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of view model. So I'm clicking here, it goes in here and it says, okay, the event command is called load. I'm now going to call this thing called handle request. Okay. One of my things is I want my controller methods to be as small as possible. To me, all of the heavy lifting belongs in the view model, not in the controller. So I try to keep everything down there. So I always just call a thing called handle request. All right. So now I go in here and I look at that event command and I compare it against a case here, and the case for load says, oh, okay, yeah, well, shoot, you just want to load products. Great. Go out, do a get all the products. So now those are all loaded up. All right. And that's all I have to do. Break out of this. I come back. And we see the list of products is now being displayed. There we go. Now, I'll hit add new product. And if you remember, the command now for this, right, if we look at the view model, the event command is add, because that's what was on that data-custom-command. So that got set into that hidden input variable, which then got posted back, got put into my view model. So now my handle request says, oh, what am I supposed to do? Oh, I'm supposed to create an empty product. Okay, what does that do? Well, that goes out and says, oh, let's create a new product, assign some default values here. So notice I set the standard cost to 1, I set the list price to 2. Okay. It fills in the selected product property. It then sets is detail visible equal to true. Now, remember what happens now when we go here to the product maintenance. It says, oh, is detail visible? Is that equal to true? It is now. So now it knows to display this and not the list of data. And then it passes in the selected product, which we just filled in with an empty. So if we run this, we now have the empty data, but there you can see the cost and the price. Okay. If we were to look at the save button in the detail, we would see the save button has a data-custom command equal to save. So when we hit, well, let's fill some data in here. Okay. Product, product number, color red, cost price, that's fine, wait. And let's hit save, okay? So now, if we were to look at the view model, right, there's the save event command. The selected product has all the data that I just filled in through the data binding, okay? And, oops, sorry, I hit the wrong key. Shoot. Let me just do it again real quick, sorry. Let's go ahead and just edit this. Okay, so when I do an edit, what does it say? It says to do an edit. That says load a product, this time using the event argument, which happens to be the ID of the one I want to load. So it loads that guy, sets the is detail visible to true. Okay, displays that product. If I make any changes, and then I hit save, this time I'll hit the right key. So F11, now it says to do a save, right? So it says, hey, does that product ID, does it have a value? It does. So we must be doing an update. Okay, so it says take that selected product, pass it in all the new change I made there, call the repository, uses the entity framework here, does a save changes, and there we go. And then it loads the products, right? Because I want to load the list, sets the is detail visible to false, which means it tells now the product maintenance stuff that this is false, so it should now display the list. We'll run this, and there we are. And then same thing for the delete, right? It just passes a delete, okay? But on the delete, let me show you the delete and the edit, because I added that one additional thing, which is a data-custom-arg. So data-custom-arg, and you can see here I use the product ID, and also on the delete, I use the product ID. So that's what gets filled in to this other guy here, the event argument, and that's what I use then to say which ID am I deleting, which one am I updating. All right, guys, so there we go. We've walked through tons of stuff here. Okay, I got my samples up here for you, but check out my Pluralsight videos. I've got a ton of them on JavaScript. I got geolocation, WPF, you know, all sorts of stuff here. But for you guys, go to pdsa.com/downloads. There's a little drop down. It says user groups presentations and then la.net user group, and that'll lead you to where all the samples are that I showed you tonight. Okay, so oops. There you go. All right, so go ahead, take a screenshot of that, write that down, whatever you need to do. Okay. Also, like I said, check out my online training there. If you do find yourself in any need of help, mentoring, training, consulting, I am available for hire. I'm not fully retired. I'm just semi-retired at this point. You can connect with me at psheriff@pdsa.com or hit up pdsa.com and you can find out everything that I offer these days. Other than that, any other questions on anything I presented?
At least so far, it looks like you know, no one's chiming in with any. And you were really good at answering everything as we went along. And I really appreciate everyone's you know, participation and actively asking questions and all that. That's really what makes these things a lot more fun and worthwhile. So I always really appreciate that from the organizer side.
Absolutely. I love it too, because that means I know people are paying attention. So thank you everyone for your questions. So, and I hope I answered them all correctly and to your satisfaction. So.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like anything new is popping in, so I think we can probably let everyone go, that yourself included, Paul. Just want to say thanks again for going through all that. That was a lot of really, really awesome content. You managed to jam a lot of good content into not that much time, so that was impressive.
It was a lot, and I am sorry I had to go so fast, but I figured everybody's going to have the you know, the samples. They'll be able to go back. Yeah, I appreciate everybody's attending tonight, and yeah, maybe someday I'll get back out there to LA. Don't count on it anytime soon.
Well, hopefully we can make that happen at some point in the future when that's safe and that's a thing that we can do in this world again. But thanks again for going through this, and thanks again to everyone else for tuning in and asking questions. This will be up on our YouTube channel, and we'll post links, you know, sometime in the next few days when things get posted there, and we'll include links to you know, what Paul has up here as well. And we hope to see you in at our next meeting in early November. Until then, stay safe, healthy, and have a great night, folks.
Yep. Stay safe and healthy, everybody. Bye-bye.